This one scene cemented my love for this show.
Why the hostility towards humans?
Hostility is inaccurate.
Is this a mass suicide?
It is not.
Criticism of civilization's excesses?
It is not.
Is it a love of nature?
It is not.
Hedonism, then?
It is not.
So nihilism?
It is not.
Revenge towards humanity?
It is not.
Glorification?
It is not.
A desire to be accepted?
It is not.
So what is it, then? Disgust?
It's not because it's peak fiction or a masterclass in exposition. If anything, I'm surprised this scene hasn't been memed to death. I love this moment because it hints at an interesting change, not just within Code Geass, but also our collective narrative about why bad people do what they do. Fiction is the best way to talk about touchy subjects without stepping on any toes. So today I want to examine Norland, his relevance within Code Geass canon, and what this type of antagonist says about our current world. Before we go into Code Geass' version of Commander Char, I want to ask you a favor. Please press that like button and hit subscribe. No, seriously, like and subscribe. Your lord.
Sakuya Sumeragi command you. If you refuse, you die.
And oh, by the way, spoilers ahead. There has always been a consistent formula to the show. Antagonists were paternalistic tyrants enforcing their own idealized vision. While we may not agree with them, there's an ideology to grapple with. But what happens when your ideology is pure disgust? How do you argue with someone who's driven by pure aversion to your existence? It's easy to rationalize evil when it's driven by pain and trauma. But for Norland, his revulsion is nothing more than pure, simple distaste. Some may attribute it to bad writing. Like, the studio was too lazy to build a solid motivation for their antagonist. But viewing it from that perspective is kinda short-sighted. The franchise has dealt with its fair share of cerebral foes. Anyone who can pilot a recognizable, aka merchandisable mech, is a strategic or tactical genius.
Let me guess, you think this is checkmate because you've got me cornered. Of course you do, because that's exactly what I wanted you to think.
So having another genius megalomaniac with a penchant for philosophy would get old. What makes Norland interesting is that he's far more realistic than previous foes. By that I mean not everyone who wants power has a solid philosophy for doing so. For them, strength is an end unto itself. Because of that, I think he serves as excellent social commentary. This may seem a little too far-fetched for a franchise with giant robots and magical powers, but it actually wouldn't be the first time Studio Sunrise, the creators of Code Geass, used mechs to comment on society. But before we go into that, let's get everyone up to speed about what's happening in this new spinoff. Rose of the Reclamation takes place 5 years after the original series. A small contingent of loyalist Britannian forces led an invasion of Japan's northern island of Hokkaido. These Neo-Britannians annexed the area, using the island's defenses against itself. They activated this anti-nightmare force field, thus keeping the Black Knights out and turning the region into a prison. Their motives for doing all this? Resentment. After the death of Lelouch, the former rulers of the world found themselves in a bind. Their once subjects are now free and able to deal with some of the same brutality they had experienced under Britannian rule. In regions of their former empire, Britannians are second-class citizens. This has driven some to crave the return to the old status quo. It's through their commander Norland von Lundberg their ambitions are renewed. But who is Norland? What do we know about him? At the time of writing this, not much. Outside of being the previously hidden Knight of Five, and a child murderer of course, it was recently revealed that he was the clone of Charles Z. Britannia. Charles created Norland as a replacement body to transfer his consciousness over to. He allowed Norland to serve within his court and move around autonomously, which is kind of batshit crazy. Like, why wasn't he put in a vat or something? Do you know how much instability it would cause if people found out that their emperor's clone was hiding behind a flimsy Halloween mask? But Lelouch did fight a whole civil war while never missing a homework assignment, so I guess that makes sense. In the scenes we do get of Norland, he demonstrates an extreme amount of brutality. He saves children only to raise them as bloodthirsty soldiers, well-tuned instruments of war. Norland displays callous indifference to his subordinates, killing ones that have far outlived their usefulness. And of course, he wouldn't be a Code Geass villain if he didn't mindfuck someone every now and then. He went as far as to kill his adopted son in front of his brother because he got in the way of a mission. He fits well into the franchise's brand narrative. Hidden behind the cool robots and hot female pilots has always been a story about power. Genre-wise, this makes sense. The mecha genre, more accurately the real robot genre, has always been an analog for war. Mechs represent the synthesis of man and war machines. Like a knight riding a horse, man and beast, both perfectly in sync. It's through these titans that we see hard power made manifest, anthropomorphized versions of the military-industrial complex. It's these masculine characteristics that make the genre so cool, but also repetitive. What Code Geass does to spice things up is create an alternative metaphor for softer, more typically associated with feminine power, the ability to persuade, propagandize, and influence, not by the barrel of a gun, but through charisma, inspiration, and deception. It's a power that the series often gives to its most vulnerable characters. Think about Lelouch or Sakuya, not necessarily combat-driven, but still highly capable in their own right. If I were to put it another way, mechs represent violence and martial prowess, like the Greek god of war Ares. Geass represents mastery over the mind and strategy, like the Greek goddess of war Athena. One narrative constant is how Geass is superior to pure martial ability. I mean, it doesn't matter how good you are at piloting a giant robot if I can enslave your mind. So you'd imagine any character who hears about this power would want it. Well, that's only half true of Norland. Out of curiosity, he wanted to know if Sakuya was capable of giving him Geass. When she tells him that she's not, he doesn't threaten her, torture her, or try any other method of coercion. He just moves on with his plan to exterminate the human race. He treats it like it's only a minor inconvenience. It would be a useful power, but unlike other Code Geass villains, he doesn't want to dominate. He doesn't want to be king. He wants to wipe the board clean. This is a stark contrast to the Machiavellian ambition to Lelouch, Schneisel, and Charles. He's an exterminator who wants to kill as many people as possible. Even Schneisel, who wanted to use the brutish power of the Flea, had an endgame. Power was a tool, but Norland's power has no ethic. In a sense, we're getting to see what would happen if you put Sukuna into the world of Code Geass. He knows that his strength is enough to purge the world of everything he sees as inferior. With all his sadistic brutality, you would think his forces might turn away from him. They don't though there are hints at mutant, like with Best Girl Catherine, which, by the way, does anyone know where I can get like Catherine merch? I'm asking for a friend, of course. But why cling to a psychopath like Norland? Especially his inner circle of knights who know how bad he can be. It's because they want to be strong. To them, Norland embodies the ideal use of strength. He's a bulldozer pushing aside the weak or inefficient. He doesn't rely on politicians or noblemen. He sees what is best and he does it. He exercises violence for his own ends and makes no apology for it. He is a heroic strongman for the downtrodden Britannians, people who feel weak and servile. They want a leader who gives them permission to be terrible, but there is an issue in giving power to strongmen. They are rarely what they appear to be on the surface, and when you give them power, you have no control over how they use it. Watching this, I can't help but draw comparisons to the rise of authoritarianism in the West and other parts of the world. We've seen a return to strongmen using people's anger and hatred as a tool for the acquisition of power. In the West, many have been swayed by the appeal of fascism and its promise of a return to a glorious past, back when men were men and conquest and imperialism were your birthright. We've also seen a generation feel disenfranchised by the rise of income inequality and the loss of social mobility. This, coupled with growing anti-Western sentiments, has caused a wave of resentment.
This morning, Turkey says 15 people have been detained after 2 US Marines were physically assaulted in broad daylight while on a break during a scheduled port visit. At one point, one man unable to break free, shouting for help.
It's resentment mixed with the seduction of power that creates the conditions for tyranny. It's not a stretch for Sunrise to implement these elements into a story either. If you look at Code Geass's predecessor, Gasaraki, its commentary was less subtle. The series, set in the modern day, kicks off with an American-led UN coalition invading the Middle East. The fictional country of Belgistan, led by a vicariously mustached dictator, finds itself besieged on the false premise that it's harboring weapons of mass destruction. This is actually a ploy by a group of deep state actors using governments as proxies to try to gain access to one of the country's resources. Anybody hearing the story will immediately draw comparisons to the Iraq War. Only this show came out on October 4th of 1998, and the Iraq War didn't start until March 20th of 2003. That's a total of 5 years. It's almost as if Dick Cheney saw this series and said, "Hey, guys, I got a great idea." There are a lot of other poignant themes critiquing American imperialism. The series also makes a strong argument against intruding into other nations' sovereignty. These arguments parallel the ones made by Code Geass against the American-coded Britannian Empire. It's because of these parallels that I have to ask, is Studio Sunrise reading the tea leaves again? Is there something within the story that will help us understand our future? Did I run out of script ideas? The answer to all these questions is a resounding yes. But these questions are worth asking. Asking questions and trying to get new meanings and interpretations is how we really show that we appreciate our favorite media. The biggest question we're left with is, what is the value of a power that only destroys? The power that the Neo-Britannians aspire to doesn't build anything. It turns cities into ghettos and men into monsters. If you are glorious, why do you need the admiration of people who are lesser than you to feel that way? If you are strong, why do you need to dominate the weak? Only weak people need to feel strong. If you're truly strong, that strength is a part of you. It's because they know that they're no better than the people that they're trying to harm. It's just the weak trying to dominate the weak instead of seeking to challenge somebody who's really strong. Because guys, if there's any lesson to be learned, it's this. Be mindful of your idol, and be careful who you give power to. I want to do a much longer video on the symbolic meaning of Geass in the future. But right now, my main focus is an in-depth video on MAPPA's first ever full-length feature film, Maboroshi. Till then, I'll be releasing shorter videos like this one. If you like this video and want to show support, please like and subscribe. And if you like hearing about the symbols hidden within your favorite anime, watch my previous video on Grave of the Fireflies. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.